The grand atrium of the Galactic Summit was the most beautiful place in the known universe. Crystal pillars rose from the floor like frozen waterfalls, catching light from 1,000 floating orbs and scattering it into rainbows across the assembled crowd. Representatives from every major species in the galaxy had gathered here, dressed in their finest armor, robes, and ceremonial garments. This was the place where empires were built and destroyed with nothing but words. Ambassador stood near the center of the hall, her iridescent wings catching the light as she turned to greet each passing delegate. She was young for a seraphim diplomat, barely 300 years old, but she had already made a name for herself in the Dominion's political circles. Her silver hair flowed down her back like liquid metal, and her eyes glowed with a soft violet light that marked her noble bloodline. Around her, the galaxy's most powerful beings mingled and negotiated. The warriors towered over everyone else, their green skin covered in ceremonial battle scars, their forearms folded across massive chests. The collective moved in groups, their crystalline bodies chiming softly as they walked, communicating through vibrations that only they could understand. The ancient floated in their gravity thrones, their withered bodies hiding minds that could crush a lesser being with a single thought. This was the succession summit. Queen of the Seraphim Dominion was dying, and her daughter Thessaly would soon take the void throne. The throne controlled the trade routes that connected half the galaxy, and every species wanted to ensure their interests would be protected under the new ruler. The stakes could not be higher. Was discussing trade agreements with a representative when she heard the main doors open. She turned, expecting another important delegation to arrive. Instead, she saw a single figure walking into the hall. He was human. Felt her lips curl into a smile. She leaned toward her companion, a fellow seraphim named, and whispered, "Is this a joke?" The human was remarkably unremarkable. He stood perhaps 6 feet tall, which made him shorter than almost everyone else in the room. He had no natural armor like no crystalline beauty like no wings like the seraphim. His skin was a plain pinkish color, and his hair was a boring brown. He wore a simple military uniform with a few medals on his chest that meant nothing to anyone present. He walked alone, no guards, no advisors, no entourage, just one human soldier in a room full of the galaxy's most powerful beings. "They sent one person," said, her voice full of disbelief. "The humans sent one person to represent their entire species at the most important political event of the century." Laughed, she could not help it. The sound came out high and musical, the natural laugh of her species, and it drew the attention of several nearby delegates. She did not care. This was too amusing. Humans had only been traveling among the stars for 200 years. They were newcomers, children playing in a galaxy of ancient civilizations. The Seraphim Dominion had existed for 10,000 years. They had been old when the first Seraphim learned to fly, and humans thought they belonged here. "They probably could not afford to send more," said. "I hear their economy is still recovering from their last internal war." "They are always having internal wars," replied. "It is amazing they have not destroyed themselves yet." Watched as the human was directed to his seat by a protocol officer. His seat was at the far end of the hall, near the servants' corridor. It was the seat reserved for the least important delegations, the ones that were invited only as a formality. The human did not complain. He simply walked to his seat and sat down, his face calm and expressionless. Something about his calmness annoyed. He should be embarrassed. He should be ashamed to be here alone, representing a species that the galaxy barely acknowledged. Instead, he sat there like he belonged. She decided to remind him of his place. Walked across the hall, her wings spreading slightly to catch the light and draw attention to her approach. Several delegates watched her go, curious about what she was doing. She stopped in front of the human and looked down at him with a practiced smile. "You seem lost, little warrior," she said sweetly. "The viewing gallery for lesser species is on the upper level. I can have someone show you the way." The human looked up at her. His eyes were brown, the color of dirt or dead leaves. There was nothing special about them, but something in his gaze made her pause. He was not angry, he was not embarrassed. He was just looking at her, like he was seeing something she could not see. "I am exactly where I need to be," he said. His voice was quiet but steady. Laughed again. "And where is that? Sitting alone while the real powers decide the fate of the galaxy." "Yes," he said simply. She waited for him to say more, to defend himself or his species or explain why he was here. He did not. He just sat there, looking at her with those strange, calm eyes. "Your name?" she asked, more curious now than mocking. "Commander Cole, Terran Defense Forces." "Well, Commander Cole, I hope you enjoy watching history being made. Try not to fall asleep." She turned and walked away, her wings catching the light one more time. Behind her she heard no response. No angry words, no bitter muttering, just silence. What did not see was the way the honor guard shifted as she passed. They were elite warriors, 7 feet of muscle and armor, afraid of nothing in the galaxy. But when Cole had walked past them earlier, they had stepped aside. Not out of respect, out of something else, something older. What did not notice was the way they had turned their attention to the human when he entered. Their ancient minds had reached out, brushing against his thoughts the way they did with all newcomers. And then they had pulled back, quickly, like someone pulling their hand away from a fire. What did not understand was why, in a room full of the galaxy's greatest predators, the small human with the boring eyes sat so perfectly still, so perfectly calm, so perfectly patient. Like a hunter in a blind, like a wolf among sheep who did not know they were sheep. The summit began, and the fate of empires hung in the balance. And Cole sat in his assigned seat near the servants' corridor, watching everything, saying nothing, waiting. Would learn soon enough what he was waiting for. They all would. But by then, it would be too late to laugh. The first day of the summit passed slowly. Delegates argued about trade routes, border disputes, and taxation agreements. Princess Thessaly sat on a smaller throne beside her mother's empty seat, listening to every word with careful attention. She was young and beautiful, with wings the color of sunrise and eyes that sparkled like diamonds. The galaxy expected great things from her. Spent most of the day watching the human. She told herself it was because she was bored. The trade negotiations were dull, and she had already memorized her delegation's talking points. But really, she was curious. Cole sat in his distant seat for hours without moving. He did not speak. He did not vote on any proposals. He did not even seem to be paying attention. He just sat there, still as a statue, watching. "What is he doing?" asked during a break in the proceedings. "Nothing," replied. "Absolutely nothing. He is a placeholder, a symbol. The humans want to pretend they matter, so they sent someone to sit in a chair and do nothing." "Then why are you watching him?" Did not have a good answer for that. That evening, there was a reception in the Crystal Gardens. Delegates mingled beneath trees made of frozen light, drinking wine that cost more than most planets earned in a year. Alliances were formed in whispered conversations. Secrets were traded like currency. This was where the real politics happened. Found Cole standing alone by a window that looked out into deep space. He held a glass of water, not wine, and he was staring at the stars with an expression she could not read. She approached him before she could stop herself. "You have not said a single word in 2 days of negotiations," she said. "You have not voted. You have not made any proposals. Why are you even here?" He turned to look at her. In the dim light of the gardens, she noticed things she had missed before. There were scars on his hands. Old scars faded to white, many of them, too many for a diplomat or politician. "I am not here to talk," he said. "Then what are you here for?" He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Do you know what humans were doing 200 years ago, before we learned to travel among the stars?" Shook her head. "We were killing each other," said. We had weapons that could destroy entire cities in a single flash. We used them. Twice. And then we built more. We spent decades pointing those weapons at each other, waiting for someone to make a mistake. That sounds terrifying, admitted. It was. We lived under a shadow of death for generations. And then we looked up at the stars and realized we were not alone, that there was more to existence than our small, violent world. He looked back at the window. We decided to be better, to reach for something greater, but we never forgot what we were, what we could be again if we had to be. Did not know what to say. She had expected him to be defensive, to make excuses for his species. Instead, he was simply honest, uncomfortably honest. Before she could respond, alarms began to sound. Red light flooded the crystal gardens. Guards rushed in from every entrance, shouting in a dozen languages. The pleasant music stopped, replaced by the harsh wail of emergency sirens. "What is happening?" demanded of a passing guard. "Security breach," the guard replied, his face pale. "Assassins, they have taken the princess." Felt her blood turn to ice. Princess Thessaly, the future of the Dominion, taken. The next few hours were chaos. The station went into lockdown. Every delegate was confined to their quarters while security forces searched for the princess. Reports came in, each one worse than the last. The assassins were, at least a dozen of them, maybe more, elite warriors with military-grade weapons and armor. They had killed 6 guards during the kidnapping and escaped into the lower levels of the station. The lower levels were a maze of maintenance tunnels, storage areas, and abandoned sections. Thousands of places to hide, thousands of ways to escape. Joined a search party against the advice of her security team. She was not a warrior, but she was fast, and her eyes could see in the dark better than most species. She would not sit in her quarters while the future of her people was in danger. The search party consisted of a dozen seraphim guards, armed with energy lances and wearing light combat armor. They moved through the lower levels in tight formation, checking every room, every corridor, every shadow. They found nothing. The assassins had vanished like ghosts. After 2 hours of searching, they found the first body. It was the assassin, lying in a dark corridor. His armor was cracked. His neck was twisted at an angle that should have been impossible. His weapons were still in their holsters, unfired. "What did this?" one of the guards whispered. No one answered. They moved forward. They found more bodies. Another assassin with his skull caved in. 2 more killed so quickly they still had expressions of surprise on their faces. A heavy gunner whose own rifle had been used to beat him to death. And then they found the blood trail. It led down a long corridor that had gone completely dark. The guards activated their lance lights and followed the trail, weapons ready, hearts pounding. At the end of the corridor they found Princess Thessaly. She was unconscious, propped against a wall, but breathing, alive, safe. Standing over her, surrounded by the bodies of 6 more assassins, was Cole. He was holding 2 captured blades. His uniform was torn. Blood dripped from a dozen wounds on his body, but he was standing, and the assassins were not. He looked at the seraphim guards with those same calm, brown eyes. "She is stable," he said. "They gave her a mild sedative. It will wear off in an hour." Stared at the carnage around her. 15 assassins, the best killers their empire could produce, dead, all of them. Killed by 1 human. 1 small, unremarkable human. How she breathed. Wiped blood from his face. Most of it was not his. "Humans do not have claws," he said quietly. "We do not have armor or venom or wings, so we learned other things." He dropped the blades. They clattered on the floor, loud in the silence. "We learned violence." Finally understood. They had stepped aside because they sensed it. They had pulled back because they felt it. The calm in his eyes was not peace. It was control. And behind that control was something old, something hungry, something that had survived ice ages and predators and wars that burned entire continents, something that had crawled out of the darkness of one small world and learned to kill anything that threatened it. Humans were not weak. Humans were waiting, and had laughed at them. The medical team arrived within minutes. They took Princess Thessaly to the station's best medical facility, where doctors from 6 different species worked to ensure she was unharmed. The sedative the assassins had used was strong but not dangerous. She would wake within hours, confused but healthy. Cole refused medical treatment. "I am fine," he said, even as blood dripped from cuts on his arms and face. "These are minor wounds. I have had worse." The Seraphim guards did not know how to respond. They had trained their entire lives for combat. They were among the best warriors in the Dominion. And this human, this small creature with no natural weapons, had done what none of them could have done. He had walked into the darkness alone and killed 15 elite assassins with nothing but his hands and stolen blades. Stayed behind as the others left. She needed to understand. "How did you find her?" she asked. Was examining a wound on his forearm, pressing a piece of torn cloth against it to stop the bleeding. "I followed the signs," he said. "What signs?" "Our security teams found nothing." "Your security teams were looking for, they were looking for soldiers following a plan." He tied off the bandage with his teeth and looked at her. "I was looking for predators with prey, different patterns, different tracks." "But the darkness, the maze of tunnels, how did you navigate?" "Humans evolved as persistence hunters," said. "We used to chase animals across plains for hours, sometimes days, until they collapsed from exhaustion. We do not have the best eyes or the best ears or the best nose, but we can track, we can follow, we do not give up." He stood, testing his injured leg. It held his weight barely. "They were fast," he continued, "stronger than me, better armed, but they were carrying an unconscious prisoner through unfamiliar territory. They left marks, scuffs on the walls where their armor scraped, blood drops from the princess where the sedative injection site had not fully healed, heat signatures on surfaces they touched." "You track them by heat signatures, without equipment." "Humans have decent heat sensitivity in our fingers," said. "Not as good as some species, but good enough. A surface that was touched recently feels different than one that was not. It is subtle, but in the dark, subtle is all you have." Shook her head in disbelief. "And when you caught up to them, 15 warriors, Commander, 15. Not all at once." He started walking toward the exit, followed. "I found the first group of 3 in a storage area," he explained. "They were resting, waiting for the others to secure an escape route. They did not expect anyone to find them so quickly. They did not expect anyone at all." "You killed 3 warriors by surprise." "Humans are very good at surprise. We have had thousands of years of practice killing each other. We have developed techniques." His voice was flat, not proud, not ashamed, just stating facts. "The others heard the fighting," he continued. "They came to investigate, but they came in small groups. The tunnels were narrow. They could not use their size advantage. They could not use their heavy weapons without risking the princess. And they could not see me." "Could not see you. You are not invisible." "No, but I was patient. I waited in the shadows. I let them pass. I attacked from behind, from above, from angles they did not expect. I used their own weapons against them. I used the environment. I used everything." They reached a junction in the corridor. Stopped, leaning against the wall for a moment. He was more injured than he had admitted. Could see it now, the way he favored his right side, the way his breathing was slightly uneven. "The last 6 were guarding the princess directly," he said. "They knew I was coming by then. They were ready. It was difficult." "Difficult?" repeated. "One of them almost killed me. He had me pinned against a wall, his hands around my throat. I could feel my vision going dark." Touched his neck where bruises were already forming. "But humans do not stop fighting when we are dying. We fight harder. It is instinct, survival, the same instinct that helped our ancestors kill predators 10 times their size with nothing but sharpened sticks. What did you do? I put my thumbs in his eyes. Felt sick. She was a diplomat, not a soldier. She had never experienced real violence, only read about it in reports and historical documents. Hearing it described so calmly, so matter-of-factly, was disturbing in ways she had not expected. You could have died, she said. You almost did die. Why did you do it? Looked at her with those brown eyes. For a moment she thought she saw something behind the calm, something tired, something old. Because someone had to, he said. The princess was in danger. There was no time to wait for backup, no time to form a plan. Someone had to go into the dark and bring her back. But why you? You are a diplomat, a representative. You are not even a real soldier. Almost smiled. It was the first expression other than calm she had seen on his face. I was a soldier before I was a diplomat, he said. 20 years of service, 3 wars, more combat operations than I can count. He looked at his hands. The medals on my uniform are not for talking, ambassador. They are for surviving. They walked in silence for a while. The station's corridors were still empty, still locked down. Emergency lights cast everything in shades of red. The galaxy thinks humans are weak, said finally. We look at you and see small, soft creatures with no natural weapons, no armor, no special abilities. We laugh at you. I laughed at you. I know. How do you stand it? How do you stay so calm when everyone dismisses you? Stopped walking. He turned to face her fully, and for the first time she saw something other than calm in his eyes. She saw weight, burden, the look of someone who had seen too much and carried too much and would carry more still. Because we know what we are, he said quietly. We know what is hiding behind the soft skin and the small bodies. We remember the wars, the bombs, the camps, the genocides. We remember what we did to each other, and we are terrified of what we might do to others. He held up his hands, the hands that had killed 15 warriors in a single night. These hands have done terrible things, he said. Not just tonight, many nights, many years. Humans are not weak, ambassador. We are dangerous, and we spend every day trying to be better than our instincts, trying to earn our place among the stars through kindness instead of conquest. He lowered his hands. But when kindness fails, when there is no other choice, we are still the same creatures who killed mammoths with spears and conquered our world with fire and steel. We are still the monsters from our own nightmares. He started walking again. That is why we sent one soldier to the summit, he said over his shoulder. Not because we do not care, because we care too much, because we are afraid of what we might become if we showed the galaxy who we really are. Watched him go, limping slightly, bleeding slowly, carrying the weight of his species on his shoulders. She did not laugh. She was not sure she would ever laugh again. The rescue of Princess Thessaly changed everything. When the summit resumed the next day, Cole was no longer sitting at the far end of the hall. He had been moved to a position of honor, closer to the center, though he had not asked for it. The Seraphim delegation had insisted. The Empire claimed the assassins were acting alone. Rogue elements, they said. Not sanctioned by the Empire. No one believed them, but no one could prove otherwise. Thane, the warlord, sat in his seat with his massive arms crossed, glaring at anyone who dared to question his honor. But everyone noticed that he did not look at the human, not once. Watched as delegates who had ignored for days now sought him out. The collective, those crystalline beings who rarely spoke to anyone outside their own kind, requested a private meeting. The ancient and powerful sent a formal acknowledgement of his actions. This was something they had never done for any species they considered lesser. Word had spread through the station like fire. 1 human, 15 assassins, in the dark alone with nothing but his hands and stolen weapons. The story grew with each telling. Some said he had killed 20 assassins. Some said 30. Some whispered that he had not even been armed when he found the first group, that he had killed them with his bare hands and taken their weapons. Said nothing to correct the stories. He simply sat in his new seat and watched the proceedings just as he had before. But now, when his eyes swept the room, delegates looked away. On the third day after the rescue, Thane finally approached him. The warlord was massive, 8 feet tall, with 4 arms as thick as tree trunks and skin the color of moss. His face was covered in ritual scars, each one representing an enemy he had killed in personal combat. There were hundreds of them. He stopped in front of, blocking out the light from the floating orbs above. "You killed my warriors," growled. His voice was like thunder rolling across mountains. The entire hall went silent, every eye turned to watch. Looked up at the warlord. He did not stand. He did not reach for a weapon, he just looked. "They were trying to kidnap a princess," he said calmly. "I stopped them. They were elite soldiers, the best my empire can produce. You are one human, one soft, small, weak human." "Yes." Leaned closer. His breath smelled like copper and smoke. "I could tear you apart where you stand," he said quietly. "I could crush your skull with one hand. I could rip your arms from your body and beat you to death with them." Did not blink. "You could try," he agreed. "But you will not, because you are wondering if I would find a way to kill you before I died. And the fact that you are wondering means you already know the answer." The silence stretched, could hear her own heartbeat in her ears. Then laughed. It was a harsh, barking sound, like rocks falling down a cliff, but it was genuine. "You have fire, little predator," the warlord said. "Your species may be more interesting than I thought." He turned and walked away, and saw something she never expected to see. Respect. Grudging and angry, but real. The greatest warrior in the empire had just acknowledged a human as an equal. The summit continued. Trade agreements were signed. Border disputes were settled. Princess Thessaly recovered fully and returned to her duties, thanking personally for saving her life. He accepted her thanks quietly, almost uncomfortably, like he did not know what to do with gratitude. On the 7th day, the queen arrived. Queen of the Seraphim Dominion was dying. Everyone knew this. She had been too ill to attend the summit, leaving her daughter to represent the throne. Her arrival was completely unexpected. She materialized via priority transport in the center of the grand atrium. The entire summit rose at her entrance. Even the inclined their gravity thrones. This was the ruler of 1,000 worlds, commander of the greatest fleet in the galaxy, mother of the air who would guide their civilization for centuries to come. She was beautiful, even in her weakness. Her wings were still radiant, catching light and scattering it like a living rainbow. Her silver hair was arranged in the ancient style of her ancestors, but her body was frail, her movements slow. She leaned on a staff made of condensed starlight, each step requiring visible effort. She walked through the grand atrium, past hundreds of delegates, acknowledging no one. Everyone watched, confused. Why was she here? What was so important that she would risk her failing health? Then she stopped. In front of Cole. Felt her breath catch. The entire hall seemed to freeze. Stood, he was healed now mostly, though faint bruises still marked his neck and face. He stood at attention as any soldier would before royalty, but he did not bow. He did not kneel. Among humans had learned, soldiers saluted but did not bow. Queen looked at him for a long moment. Then she spoke, her voice carrying to every corner of the hall. "Commander Cole," she said, 50 years ago when the Hollow Plague threatened to destroy my people, your species sent help. Doctors, scientists, volunteers who knew they might die from the plague themselves and came anyway. They saved millions of Seraphim lives. They expected nothing in return. We owed humanity a debt we believed we could never repay." She paused, letting her words sink in. 3 days ago, you saved my daughter's life. You fought alone against impossible odds, expecting no reward, no recognition. You nearly died for a princess of a species that has treated your kind with contempt and mockery. Felt her cheeks burn with shame. The queen turned to address the assembled delegates. Her voice grew stronger, filled with an authority that her failing body could not diminish. Let it be known throughout the Dominion and beyond. The debt is not repaid, it is doubled. Humanity has proven again and again that they are not the weak newcomers we dismissed. They are allies, they are warriors, they are worthy of our respect and our gratitude. And then Queen of the Seraphim Dominion, ruler of 1,000 worlds, lowered herself to one knee before Cole. The hall gasped, felt like she could not breathe. "Kneel," the queen commanded, her voice like iron. "Kneel before the human who saved the future of our empire." The silence was absolute, no one moved. Then slowly the Seraphim delegation knelt, one by one like falling stars. The collective bowed, their crystalline bodies chiming softly. They inclined their gravity thrones until they were almost touching the floor. Even Thane, the great warlord, raised his fist to his chest in a warrior's salute. It was the highest honor his people could give. Found herself on her knees before she realized she had moved. She stared up at the small human who had walked into the summit as a joke and now stood as its most honored guest. Cole looked deeply uncomfortable. His face was red, and he seemed to have no idea what to do with his hands. "Your Majesty," he said quietly, "please stand. I did not do this for recognition." "I know," said, rising slowly with the help of her staff. "That is exactly why you deserve it." She reached out and took his hand in hers. Her skin was paper-thin, almost translucent. His was and rough, but she held it gently like something precious. "Humanity asked for nothing," she said. "You gave everything. That is the difference between the powerful and the worthy." She released his hand and turned to leave. At the entrance, she paused and looked back. "Let no one in this galaxy ever forget," she said. "When the darkness came, a human walked into it alone, and he walked out again." She left. The summit rose from their knees in silence, and Cole stood alone in the center of the grand atrium, a small human in a room full of giants, looking like he wanted to be anywhere else in the universe. But he did not leave. He had earned his place among the stars. The summit concluded 1 week after the Queen's visit. Princess Thessaly's succession was confirmed without opposition. The Empire their challenge, though they made it clear they were doing so out of strategic calculation, not fear. No one believed them, but no one argued. A new alliance was announced on the final day. The Terran Concordat, they called it, a treaty binding humanity to the Seraphim Dominion as full partners, not as minor clients or forgettable newcomers. Trade agreements, military cooperation, shared technology and resources, everything that humanity had been for 2 centuries, granted in a single document. Representatives from a dozen species signed as witnesses. Even Thane added his mark, though he growled the entire time he did it. When the ceremony was over, went looking for Cole. She found him where she had first mocked him, standing alone by a window that looked out into deep space. The stars stretched before him like scattered diamonds, beautiful and cold and impossibly far away. "Ambassador," he said without turning, "I was wondering when you would find me." Stood beside him. They were silent for a moment, looking at the stars together. "I owe you an apology," she said finally. "For what?" "For laughing at you, for dismissing your entire species, for treating you like you were nothing." Turned to look at her. His brown eyes were calm as always, but there was warmth in them now, something almost like forgiveness. "You treated us the way the galaxy taught you to treat us," he said. "We were unknown, unproven. Your reaction was normal." "It was wrong." "Maybe," he turned back to the window, "but I understand it. I cannot blame someone for seeing what we showed them." Shook her head. "You are too forgiving." "No," said quietly, "I am just tired." They were silent again. Outside the window, a ship passed slowly, its lights blinking against the darkness. "Do you know what humans call ourselves in our oldest stories?" asked. "Not conquerors, not heroes, not even warriors." "What?" "Survivors. That is all we ever claimed to be. The species that refused to die." "You are more than that now," said. "You are heroes. You saved a princess. You changed the course of the galaxy." "One man," corrected. "One human in the right place at the right time. That does not make us heroes, it makes us lucky." "You do not give yourself enough credit." Smiled. It was a sad smile, the kind that came from knowing too much. "Let me tell you something about humans," he said. "Something we do not tell other species. Something we are ashamed of." Waited. "We are not special because we are strong," said. "We are not special because we are smart or fast or advanced. There are species in this galaxy that are stronger and smarter and faster than us in every way." "Then what makes you special?" "We do not stop." He looked at his hands, the hands that had killed and healed and built and destroyed. "No matter what happens, no matter how bad things get, we keep going. We adapt. We endure. We find a way even when there is no way to find." "That sounds like a gift." "It is not." His voice was heavy. "It is a curse. Do you know why we survived our wars? Why we did not destroy ourselves when we had the power to do so? It was not because we were wise. It was because we were stubborn. We refused to accept defeat even when defeat was the only rational choice." He turned to face her fully. "That same stubbornness has driven us to do terrible things," he said. "We have committed genocides because we refused to accept that others were different from us. We have destroyed civilizations because we refused to stop conquering. We have burned our own world because we refused to change our ways." "But you also sent doctors to save my people," said. "You risked your life for a princess you had never met. That is not stubbornness. That is choice." Was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was softer. "That is what we are trying to be," he said. "Every day, every decision we choose, violence or peace, fear or hope, conquest or cooperation, we do not always choose right. We fail more often than we succeed, but we keep choosing." He almost smiled again. "That is the human story," he said. "Not strength, not weakness, just trying. Every day trying to be better than we were yesterday, trying to earn our place among the stars instead of taking it." Thought about everything she had seen. The calm human who had walked into a room full of giants and sat alone without complaint. The warrior who had walked into darkness and brought a princess back to the light. The soldier who had killed 15 enemies and then refused medical treatment because he did not want to be a burden. "I think I understand now," she said, "why the queen knelt." "Why?" "Because you did not expect her to. Because you would have saved Thessaly whether anyone noticed or not. Because you are not trying to prove anything to the galaxy." She looked at him. "You are trying to prove something to yourselves." Nodded slowly. "We are still figuring out what kind of species we want to be, whether we are the monsters we have been or the heroes we could become." He looked back at the stars. The galaxy looked at us and saw prey, weak, harmless, forgettable. "We were wrong." "Yes," he turned toward the exit. "We are not prey, we never were. We are just careful about when we show our teeth." He started walking away, then stopped. He looked back at her, and for the first time, she saw something in his eyes that looked like hope. "Thank you, Ambassador," he said. "For what?" "For listening, for understanding, for giving us a chance to be more than our worst moments." He smiled, a real smile this time. "That is all we have ever wanted, a chance." He left. Stood alone in the empty atrium, looking out at the stars. She thought about the small human who had changed the fate of empires with nothing but his hands and his will. She thought about a species that had crawled out of one small world and reached for the heavens not through power, but through sheer, stubborn refusal to give up. She thought about teeth hidden behind soft smiles. strength measured in scars instead of scales, monsters who chose every day to be something better. The galaxy had laughed at humanity for 200 years. They had called them weak and small and unimportant. They had given them the worst seats at every table and expected them to be grateful. And through it all, humanity had just smiled and waited, patient, calm, ready. Because humans knew something the galaxy was only beginning to understand. The soft ones were not always the weak ones. The quiet ones were not always the harmless ones. And the ones who had nothing to prove were often the ones with the most to give. Thought about all of this, and she made a decision. She would never laugh at a human again. Not because she was afraid of them, but because they had earned her respect. And respect, she realized, was worth more than fear. It was worth more than anything. The stars burned on, cold and distant and beautiful. Somewhere out there, on a small blue world circling an ordinary yellow sun, a species of survivors was still trying, still choosing, still reaching for something greater than themselves. And the galaxy would never be the same.